Thank you very much. So I was gonna, it was what weird, as he was introducing me, Carrie Lake was calling me, and I almost took her call. So you want me to call her back now or later? I think I'll call her back later. All right, so I got to tell you something about Brian Harrison. I actually didn't know him very well, but I've gotten to watch him this last session, and I was in the house for 10 years. I know what it takes to do what he just did and what he did over the last session. He and Steve Toth and Tony Tinderholt and whom else am I missing? Number 4. Chasline. God, these guys takes a lot of courage. That's why there's only 4 of them out of 150. Because when you do what he did, when you stand up for what's right, when you stand up for your constituents, I was in the House for 10 years, I know. And I had the same disappointment that he had, finding out that the primary concern wasn't you, it was the power base in Austin, the lobby in Austin. And for him to do that and to say those things, there's a price to be paid. And it's not fun, because here's how the pecking order goes. The Republicans that control everything, the Dade-Phelan little friends, those are the best treated people in the House. Then come the Democrats. And then come the other Republicans that joined to keep the coalition together. And the people that are treated like dirt, and I mean like dirt, that are kicked, pushed around, not spoken to in a decent way or not spoken to at all, are the people that stand up for you and that do the right thing. And that's why, Brian, I have so much respect for you. I don't know where you went, but man, God bless you for what you have done. And you can never thank him enough, because that is not an easy job. He's making $600 a month to go down there and fight for you. And I know from having done that for 12 years, I mean, you have to walk away from making an income for your family, and you're volunteering your time. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all live on $600 a month, but it's not that easy. And so to do that and to take the beating that he takes and that others like him take, I mean, everybody here ought to be grateful, because he's a true hero. So thank you, Brian. You know, I got to hear Nate Chasline. He was emceeing a deal for, where was I? I was in, Michelle, where was I Friday? I've been all over the state. Mike Alcott. And he's got that same fiery passion like Brian does. Almost like, they're preachers. And I almost find it hard to follow him. But I'm really glad to be here. I'm excited to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about the impeachment. It was as much a shock to him as it was to me. I had no idea it was coming. I was not informed. As a matter of fact, I thought it was about this Democrat that had used her staff for purposes that were personal. I thought they were going to investigate her. And suddenly, it's me. And it was a 3-day process. They had 1 day of, they announced it. The next day they did their 3 days of hearings, 3 hours of hearings, not 3 days. I didn't even get 3 hours. And I tried to send my attorney to that, and they wouldn't let him speak. They didn't want to hear anything about the other side. They let 4 lawyers speak who were not sworn in, and they discussed conversations that they had other people who weren't sworn in, and they talked about conversations they had with other people that weren't sworn in, who had conversations with other people that weren't sworn in. Now, there's a Texas law that requires that all testimony be sworn. Why would we want sworn testimony? Because we want people on the hook for what they've said, pinned down, and if they lie, held accountable for it. Now, the Republican House, under Dade-Phelan, gave me less due process than Nancy Pelosi gave Donald Trump, if that gives you any idea. I got less due process than any impeachment ever in the history of the country, and it came from these wonderful Republicans who, of course, must be right. It must be true that I did something wrong, because how could this happen that Republicans would do this? Well, I'm going to tell you the story of how it happens. And it's been happening for the last 15 years, and it's really been happening longer. It's just gotten worse, because the Democrats have figured out how to control the Texas House. And it's rather shocking that they've done this and that the Republicans let it happen, but they do. And here's what happens. And I've been analyzing this for a long time, because don't you wonder, like, how do people go to Washington? How do they go to the Texas House? How do they go to the Texas Senate? And they talk like they're going to do all these great things, and then you don't ever see it happen. There's always an excuse. And then you're wondering, like, what happens to people? Tonight, I'm going to tell you. You're going to learn. And here's what happened. It's so simple. And it's taken me so long to figure it out, but I've watched hundreds of people go through this process. And here's how it happens. We're all made to want to feel like we're significant, that we matter. I think we're made in the image of God, and that is just innate in us. So people go down there mostly with good intentions, not all. Mostly go down with good intentions. They're gonna represent you. They've spent thousands of hours talking to you and finding out what you want. They're gonna go down and do it. And then within a very short period of time, many of them, sometimes it takes a couple of years, but you just see people drifting away. And here's my theory. People, you get down there, and the leadership, they've been there a long time, and they know what they want. And the only way they can get what they want is they need votes. They don't need money. They don't need anything but your vote. And so what they do is they come in and say, hey, I need your vote. So, I've been here a lot longer, and people that are new think, well, they've been there longer, so they must be right. And so there's this just assumption that they must be right. And so this happened to me. I was there my second term. I was told that we needed to vote for this payroll tax that was going to be $1,000 on every person in Texas. It was a new business tax being pushed by, Governor Perry and the leadership of the Texas House, the leadership of the Senate. I'm new. How could I be wrong? So I thought, well, I should at least check this out in my district. So I set up 25 different meetings. I went around and talked to all different types of people, and I said, hey, they've got this great idea. They want to do a payroll tax, $1,000 a person in every business. Hey, what do you think? 25 people, guess how many people liked it? Zero. Zero of my Republican friends liked the idea. So I go back, I'm on Ways and Means. There's 9 of us. There's 4 Democrats. There's 5 Republicans. I'm the youngest member by far. Everybody else is a committee chairman. The Democrats are all going to vote no. Not because they don't like it, but because they want the Republicans to pass it. And then they want to pin us with it. And so I go back and say, look, my constituents, they're 100% against this. I'm sorry, I can't vote for this. Well, you would have thought I was burning the whole house down. And suddenly I'm the enemy of the state. I'm like the bad guy. And I'm like doing the wrong thing. I'm being threatened. I'm in leadership, with leadership. They're screaming at me. They're cussing at me. They're calling my donors. They're threatening me. And I'm like, hey, I thought we were all friends. I'm just going, this is what my constituents told me to do. Well, you don't need to listen to them. You need to listen to us. Well, you know what happened? I didn't listen to them. I never became a committee chairman. They never raised money for me. But guess what? I kept getting reelected. And by the way, they couldn't get that bill out without my vote. And they passed my bill out, which was a way better bill. It cut your property taxes. And then they tried to change it on the Texas floor, and I won 150 on the House floor with the speaker trying to stop me. And of course, then they create, how this works, Brian, they create a conference committee because it's not the same thing that the Senate passed, and it's my bill, and guess who's on the conference committee? Not me, not anybody that voted for the bill, so there goes your bill. And so guess what? Governor Perry has to call us back to set a special session. They come back in to do a tax bill called the franchise tax, which is just a variation of another business tax that was bad for all of us. And guess who wonderfully is not on the tax committee anymore? Me. I'm not on the tax committee, so guess who can't stop it anymore? And so we passed this terrible business tax that we're still trying to get rid of, that no Republicans ever bragged about, that turned out only to be bad. And guess what? You know who was right? Was it the leadership of the Texas House? Was it Governor Perry? No. Guess who was right? My constituents. And I stuck with them. Brian Harrison stuck with his, but that's not what happens. And here's what happens. There's a difference between real power and perceived power. And what everybody gets tricked into is perceived power. Here's perceived power. You become a committee chairman, you're in charge of appropriations, you're in charge of state affairs, we're going to put you in charge of the biggest committees. We're also going to raise money for you. Everybody in Austin is going to think you're important, but there's a little catch here. We tell you how to vote. But you're important. You're really, if you want to get your stuff done, you want to pass your stuff, you got to have this, you got to do what we tell you to do. So yeah, you have tremendous power. You can kill stuff, but every vote you take that matters, they tell you how to vote. Now, here's real power. You go down there, they don't give you a committee assignment. They don't help you raise any money. You go back to your constituents for help. They give you money to keep you in office. They elect you, and you listen to them. You don't get any committee assignments. They don't help you at all. but you control your vote. That's what really they want. That's real power. The real power is controlling your vote. And that's the trick that all of these guys, many of these people fall into because they want to feel like they matter. They want to feel important. They want to be accepted, but they forget about their own constituents who put them there because they're not around you every day. They're in this little place called Austin, Texas, where they get sucked into believing that all of this stuff matters, and it doesn't. Because guess what? How many of you all can name a committee chairman of the House? I can't. I can name a few, but you can't. They think it's really important, and they, guess what? Nobody even knows who they are. And how many House members can you name anyway? I've been doing this a long time. I can name less than half of them, and I'm there every day. So they get overzealous in believing that they're so important. That's the trap, and that happens in D.C., that happens on school boards. I've been studying this a long time. So then, how does it happen that I get impeached? Well, first of all, I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't asked to participate. It was all secret. Why was it secret? Well, I was told, Brian, by Nate that they called you guys in, and Nate said he said, well, is there any evidence? Do we get to cross-examine any witnesses? Do we have any due process? Well, we can't let you do that because we got to do this really quick because if we give more than 48 hours, Ken will get out of it. Well, why would I get out of it? The only reason I'm going to get out of it is because you guys are going to find out what happened. They didn't want you to know, and they didn't want me to know what they had. They just wanted to bury me in accusations. And look, I'm out in 3 days. I have no staff. I have no money. I just ran a $16 million campaign. I just got elected by you. They know I can't raise money during session. I just spent $16 million on a primary with George P. Bush and others, where Texans for a Lawsuit were formed, Dick Weekly and Dick Trabolsi, who have aligned with the Bushes and with Google and Big Pharma, because that's where their money comes from, to make sure that Dade Phelan has his money, and they spent $30 million trying to get rid of me in an election, and when that didn't work, they said, let's overturn an election that happened 4.5 months ago. Let's do it really fast. Let's do it on Memorial Weekend. Let's not let him give any evidence on his side. Let's not hear any testimony. Let's not swear anybody in, and let's just get him out of there. He won't. Guess what? The Senate also puts a gag order on me. I can't even respond when they put garbage out about me that's not true. I can't even say anything. I have no First Amendment rights. They're gone. Well, meanwhile, the House has a gag order after a month, and they can leak all the stuff they want. They're leaking stuff about me every day. And so I'm in this position with little hope, wondering, how am I going to get through every day? And yet I know that I don't want to quit. They keep leaking stories that I'm going to resign. It was all false. I never once said that. I just sit down with my attorneys and say, look, whatever you read, the voters put me in here 4.5 months ago. I have a job to do. If they want to take me out, the politicians want to get rid of me, they're going to have to vote me out. And they're going to be accountable to you for whatever they do. So I'm going to make them, no matter what they say about me, no matter what they do to me, no matter how hard this is on me, I will not quit. You guys are going to have to go all the way to the end. And by the way, I don't have any money to pay you. They didn't like that part. Now, I did raise some money. I still owe them a lot of money, but I raised $3 million. That's what I was doing this summer. I was raising money, trying to just keep some lawyers in the game. Now, meanwhile, they have 17 lawyers. They have unlimited budget. By the way, Dade Phelan still hasn't told us how much he spent. Why is he doing that? He's embarrassed. He didn't want to tell you. He didn't want you to know. He's required by law to turn that over. He's ignored the law. He ignored the law on swearing in witnesses. Why didn't he want to swear at witnesses? Well, you know why he didn't want to swear them in? Because he didn't want to lock in any testimony. He didn't want them to get cross-examined. He wanted them to be able to change their story if they happen to go to trial because there's no testimony locked in. He didn't want me to know what they said. He just wanted to have this complete flexibility, put Texas law on the side. I don't have to follow it. I'm Dade Phelan. The Republicans can go forward with no law. We don't have to follow the law. Second law they ignored. There's a law that says they can't remove you for anything that occurred prior to the election. Why is that? Because if the people knew about it, and you guys voted for me anyway, which, by the way, my runoff election with George P. Bush was 68-32. It wasn't very close. And I won my general election by as much as Dan Patrick did, so it was 10 points. So that wasn't close either. And yet they said, we're just going to ignore this law. We're going to make him go, and the Senate did it too. They ignored that law too. They made me go through a trial knowing that 19 of the 20 counts happened before the election, but they needed as many things they could throw at me because all they needed was one, and they figured if they threw 20 things that were very vague, and they didn't have anything locked in where they could come in and change their story, that they could get one. And then we go to the Senate. We have a rules committee that is not favorable to me, and you say, well, it's a Republican Senate. And remember, the narrative was it's a Republican House. There must be something wrong with him if a Republican House would do this. But we now know, I knew it already, that the House is controlled by the Democrats. And you say, well, how is that true? Well, here's how it's true. And this has been true since Joe Strauss. We took over in 2003. First time we've had a Republican majority, and we elected our first Republican speaker, and we did it with Republican votes. Well, then in 2009, 3, 5, 7, 9. Have to go back. 2009, Obama gets elected. We go from having 86 Republicans to 76. We have 150 House members, 76, 74 majority. The Democrats figure out, we're darn close. Let's go find a Republican that will do what we want, and we'll get the most, we'll block vote, because we only need one more vote, and whoever are Republicans, they can vote for themselves. So they go get 11 Republicans who are all going to be committee chairmen of the best committees, and 11 Republicans and 74 Democrats take over the House. And that strategy has worked ever since. So now it's 65 Democrats. They pick out the Republican that will give them the most. They get 10 Republicans who are going to be committee chairmen of the best committees, and then every other Republican starts joining in because they don't want to lose. They don't want to give up on their bills. They want to get good committees. And the people that stand on the sidelines and say, wait a minute, the Republicans ought to pick this, they're outcasts. So guys like Brian Harrison, the most courageous, smartest, brightest people we have, are outcasts in the Texas House. That's how it works. And when the narrative is said, well, it was all these Republicans, that's not how it works. The media knows it's a lie. It's a lie. They're controlled by the Democrats. Whoever gives the Democrats the most gets the job. And one of the jobs that they wanted done, and look, I don't blame them. The Biden administration, we'd sued them 49 times in 2.5 years and won most of those cases. They wanted me out. And they went to the Texas House and said, we want him out. This is one of your jobs. And then they went to Dade Field and said, this is part of what you get. We want him out. And he said, sure, I'll do that. We can accomplish that. We'll just do it behind the scenes, and we'll put so much pressure on him that he has to leave. And that was the strategy. You say, well, how do you know the Biden administration was involved? Well, Brian, I know it's true that of the 4 attorneys that the General Investigating Committee had, there's 5 members on the General Investigating Committee, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Of the 4 lawyers that were sent in to help, 2 of them came from the Department of Justice, run by the Biden administration. Is that a coincidence? Just an accident? There's no way. There's no way that they got, just like there's no coincidence that Hugh Brady is the parliamentarian from the Obama administration. He used to work in the Obama White House in the legal department. He was White House counsel. He was one of their top lawyers. That's not an accident. The House is controlled by the Democrats. Okay, so, well, who cares? I've got the Senate, no worries. They're going to follow the law. I'm not going to have to go to trial because guess what? They're going to follow the law. Set it aside. Every other impeachment looked at the law and said, wait a minute, this happened before the election, we're not doing it. In my case, they set it aside. The Senate set it aside. And the Rules Committee that was appointed by the Lieutenant Governor was awful. They set the rules, made it very difficult for me to win. And then they got rid of a good senator, my wife. She wasn't allowed to vote. Meanwhile, I contested 3 Democrats who came out and said I was guilty before they heard any evidence. I asked for them to be recused. Nope, we got to recuse her because she's biased. They're not biased. We're going to keep them. So that meant 12 votes against me. Automatically, doesn't matter with the evidence. All Democrats are voting. But you know what? I'm okay because they need 2/3. Oh, it's unfortunate that your wife can't vote. And it's unfortunate that 3 of the Republicans want my job. And they're going to work behind the scenes to get a few other Republicans to vote on just one article to make sure I don't show up. So I'm sitting here. I have no money. Glenn Hager, the comptroller, decides to illegally take my salary away. Just another little shot that Glenn Hager took at me. And I have no money. I've got a few House members speaking up for me. I've got a few senators who are supposedly can't even talk to you working for me. And they're told they can't even talk to you because they're jurors. Well, first of all, they're not jurors. They're elected senators, and they're supposed to talk to you about everything that you want to talk about. And you know what saved me? It wasn't my legal team. My legal team was amazing. And I told them, you guys have to win every day. You have to win every hour. You have to win every minute. We have to win this. You have to win everything, or they will kick me out. And I said, and that's not even sufficient. because there's a political angle to this. Remember, there's 3 Republicans in there who want my job, plus the 12 Democrats. It's already 15. I'm getting very close to getting impeached just on that. And I said, the only thing that really is going to save you guys have to do a superb job, but it's going to be 2 things. And it was. It was the prayers of over 100,000 people around this country. And I'm not making that up. Everywhere I go, even outside of Texas, I run into people say, we were praying for you, and we had a bunch of people praying for you. We didn't even know you, but we thought this was wrong. And I'm like, this is incredible. And then the second thing was, despite the fact that they created these crazy rules where you weren't supposed to talk to them, the good thing is you guys didn't worry about that rule and you talked to them. And thank you. Thank you. That is what put the pressure on them, because they were realizing, wait a minute, I can do this, but then I'm going to lose my election. I mean, I want to get rid of him. I want his job. And the Democrats were like, they have no downside. They're going to vote no matter what. But there are a lot of Republican senators that voted for me that were, I know one Republican senator that voted for me. She cried because she was so upset that she had to vote for me. Because all of her constituents were like, you better vote for him. Thank you. So how does this all come back to why we're here for Mr. Hopper? Well, there's another piece of this story that is very important to the survival of Texas. It's the Texas House and the Court of Criminal Appeals. And I'm going to tie this together. The Court of Criminal Appeals is a 9-member body of 9 Republicans. And in Texas, we have a bifurcated system. We have the Texas Supreme Court. They are the final possible appeal. They take 80 cases a year from an appeals court on any civil case. Unlike most states, we have another court called the Court of Criminal Appeals. I think there's only one other state that does it this way. It hasn't worked out very well for us. But that's the final appeal on criminal matters. Okay, how many of you all knew that? Raise your hand, okay? See, I'm making a point here. You are, and I've been all over the state doing this for the last 2 years. You're some of the most educated voters in Texas, and you don't know what the Court of Criminal Appeals does. And I'm going to do another little test. How many, if you say yes, I'm going to make you name them. So don't just raise your hand, because I'm going to call on you. This is a true test. How many of you, anybody here, raise your hand. I think if you work for me, don't raise your hand because you're working for me. Can name the 9 members of the Court of Criminal Appeals. I'm looking for those hands. Raise those hands. Well, you've been in service before. Raise those hands. Okay, we're going to keep going. How about 8? How many can name 8? How about 7? 4? 3? By the way, don't feel bad. I've never had any audience of 1,000 people or less get more than 2. So let's see if we can get there. 2? Anybody name 2? How about 1? Okay, we got 1. That's pretty unusual. You are a winner. You're the only one, and I'd say out of every 3 audiences, I get somebody that knows 1. Okay, why did I do this test? I did this test because I'm going to give you my theory. George Soros came into the state about 10 years ago. He did a couple of things. It's really important to know this. He went to the most liberal counties where we have no say in elections, like district attorney. And he switched out all the DAs. Now, why did he do that? I used to work with some of these DAs. Travis County DA, Margaret Moore, she's a Democrat, but she would prosecute. I actually really like the Democratic DA, Nicola Hood. His brother's now running as a Republican, as a state rep. He was in Bexar County, and he and I used to work on human trafficking cases together. So what did Soros, Soros doesn't like prosecutions. He doesn't like law enforcement. He wants chaos and crime. So he came in and switched out all the DAs. He spent a little bit of money, got them all switched out, and so all the big counties now we have liberal DAs put there by Soros. That was step number 1. Step number 2 was, I believe, to elect a Republican. He couldn't elect, as a statewide office holder, we can't elect Democrats. So what did he do? He got 9 people elected, actually 8, because Kevin Urey voted the right way. He's a hero. He's the only good member of the Court of Criminal Appeals. So he elected 8 others, quietly Republican. But are they Republican? You don't know them. I don't know them. Who knows them? I'm convinced they were put there for one purpose, and they did it 2 years and 2 months ago. They struck down a statute that had been around since 1951. That statute directed me as the Attorney General. I wasn't around in 1951, so it started way before me. Directed the Attorney General to prosecute voter fraud. It's the only thing I'm allowed to prosecute. I don't have original jurisdiction in anything else. So people come to me all the time, want me to prosecute stuff, and I say, I'd love to. I'd love to prosecute human trafficking because it doesn't get done. But the DAs keep the legislature from ever giving me that authority. Most states, the Attorney General has concurrent jurisdiction, so if the DA doesn't do their job or the DA commits a crime, somebody can go after the DA. In Texas, DA can do whatever they want. As long as they don't violate federal law, they can allow all the crime they want. All their friends can commit crimes. They can commit crimes. It's okay in Texas because the legislature has not fixed that. And I can't prosecute human trafficking like I want to. But I was prosecuting voter fraud. When I came into office, I had one attorney doing that. And I was like, wow, that guy's super busy. We need more attorneys. So I asked the legislature, could you give me more attorneys for this? So I got a total of 4. And when we were doing this 2 years ago, we had over 900 cases going. So I know there's no voter fraud, but somehow we had 900 cases. It's just... There's no voter fraud because the media tells us that because no other state does it. But we were doing it. And I was prosecuting people. We were getting people for voter fraud. I know it's shocking, but we were doing it. So I'm sorry the media lied to you about that. Until 2 days after the filing deadline to run in the Republican primary against the Court of Criminal Appeals, suddenly, after 71 years, the Court of Criminal Appeals discovers that they've been wrong for the entire history of our state, and they strike down this statute that had been there for 71 years with thousands of cases of precedent, and they said it's unconstitutional for the Attorney General to be in court. I'm going to say it again for the non-lawyers. For lawyers, it's a violation of separation of powers because I'm in the executive branch. I am not allowed to be in court, and we just discovered it. Can you believe that we've been so stupid for so long, and that every state didn't figure this out, that the Attorney General is violating the Constitution, and that the U.S. Attorney General is violating the Constitution, and they're the only ones to figure it out? I'm being very facetious. They aren't figuring it out. They made this up, and they said to me, no more prosecuting voter fraud because you aren't allowed to go to court. Well, if they're right, the Supreme Court should tell me right now that the 38,000 cases that I've been doing every year, that I'm not allowed to be in court. I shouldn't be there. I can't represent the state. It's insane what they did, but they got away with it, and we aren't prosecuting voter fraud. So George Soros, he gets his DAs, he gets his Court of Criminal Appeals. The final piece was me, and he came that close. If I'm out, there's no hope to stop voter fraud, and guess what we turn into? Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona. Arizona had a Republican AG who didn't do his job. Georgia had a Republican AG that did everything he could to help the Democrats, and I know him. I knew the Republican AG ran for Senate, U.S. Senate, after doing nothing about voter fraud, and the voters rewarded him with 3rd place in a race of 3. Got what he deserved. So here's what I need. I need you guys to do 2 things. We're going to talk about the Texas House, and we're going to talk about the Court of Criminal Appeals that are completely tied together. We're going to lose Texas in 4 to 6 years unless we fix this. And we have 2 things we have to fix. One is in the Texas House, one is the Court of Criminal Appeals. We've got Kevin Urie still there out of the 9, but we've got 8 bad judges. 3 of them are up right now. No one, as I have just shown, no one knows the incumbents. You know what that means? That's bad for one reason. They've been able to get elected because no one pays attention. But it's good from another standpoint. No one knows they're there. So how hard is it to beat them? We're going to beat them. We've got 3 people running for Court of Criminal Appeals, and I'm going to give you their names. I want you not just to vote for them, I want you to tell every friend you have, because they'll vote for them because they don't know the other people. So I'm going to give you their names. I really want you to spread the word. Gina Parker. I'm going to go slow, because I really want you to spread the word. Gina Parker. David Schenck. And Lee Finley. Now, as in all races, no one's perfect. They are not the perfect candidates. But if we don't fix this with imperfect candidates, we're going to have the candidates that we have that are destroying our state. David Schenck, Lee Finley, Gina Parker. And I need you to tell all your friends. And if you tell your friends, they'll vote for them because, again, they have no idea who the other people are. And as a matter of fact, I have it in the back of my head, and I try to forget. So I'm not even going to tell you what their names are because I don't care. Okay, now let's get to the Texas House. I went to the Texas House and the Texas Senate. I said, hey, I need this fixed. I need you to repass this statute that the Court of Criminal Appeals just magically struck down and figured out was unconstitutional. Repass it, because it'll give me time to go prosecute while we're getting these people unelected. Well, it worked out great. The Senate passed it, got over to the Senate, got to a committee, and it couldn't get a hearing. So I did what I usually do. I called Dade Phelan. He does what he usually does. He didn't call me back. Not usually, he never calls me back. Brian, are you shocked? He never calls me back. I've never once got a return phone call from Dade Phelan. Now, the governor calls me back. Trump answers my calls almost every time. The lieutenant governor calls me back, but Dade Phelan apparently doesn't have the time. And I'm not being facetious. I'm not lying. He doesn't return calls. He doesn't take meetings from me. In the entire 4 years, the only way I've ever caught him is just to go over there and just run into him, to try to talk to him. And the last time I did that, they kicked me out. I was talking to Brian, and they kicked me out. As a former House member who has privileges over there, they kicked me off. I wasn't even on the floor. I was in the back. I was just in the back hall. And you were there. They made me leave. That's incredible. Such disrespect for just somebody that's talking to other members. So, Dade Phelan's, I ended up talking to some of his people, some of his other members, and they said, look, we just don't have time to do this. Brian, isn't that kind of what you said? We just don't have time. I found out why they didn't have time. They were busy doing impeachments. They didn't care about you. They didn't care about whether we saved the state from fraud, and here I'm going to tell you one more story about fraud and why I know it's real. It's not just that we had 900 and something cases. When Trump was up for re-election against Biden, it was overwhelming. We had 12, all of a sudden we just had 12 cases where, because of COVID, all these liberal judges in Austin and Harris County and Dallas and Bexar County all of a sudden decided that the law didn't matter anymore. I mean, of course, they do that all the time anyway. But as it related to mail-in ballots, the legislature, and I don't even like this, had said, okay, you can mail in ballot if you are out of town, you're over 65, you're disabled, really disabled, not COVID disabled, or you're in prison but you're not a felon. Those are the 4 reasons, okay? That's what the legislature says. That's what it should be. Well, these judges said, well, because of COVID, those rules are out. We're just going to mail them to everybody. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot. Okay, why is that a problem? Well, you remember the story from all these states that Trump was winning at night and then he lost by 3 days of voting. Remember they said, you can't prove voter fraud? You know what? They're right. You know why? Because the way they did it. Here's what they were trying to do in Texas. And we fought every one of these lawsuits, all 12 of them. The way it normally works is you apply for a mail-in ballot and you give your reason as to why, one of those reasons, and then they mail you back a ballot. And they mail you back an envelope to put the ballot in. Well, when you send the application in, you sign the application. Now, this isn't good as photo ID, but it is something. When they mail it back to you and you fill out your ballot, you stick it in the envelope, you sign it. You mail it back in, they compare signatures to see if they match. Again, not the best, but something. And then once they've looked at it and said, okay, these signatures match, then they pull the ballot out and they destroy the envelope so they don't know who voted for who. That's how it works in almost every state. So I called Trump in May and I said, Mr. President, I just want you to know that there's a decent chance you lose Texas. And he's like, what are you talking about? That's not possible. I won by 8 or 9%. I said, yeah, about 620,000 votes in Texas. I said, but I've got 12 lawsuits, and if I lose any one of these lawsuits, and remember, I'm in liberal counties with liberal judges, I've got an appeals court that is all liberal, and they're trying to stall me so that I don't get this done before they mail out the ballots. Because once they mail out the ballots, the genie's out of the bottle. I can't undo it. It's too late. We lost. So I said, I got to win all 12, Mr. President. If I lose like one county, let's just say I lose Harris, the biggest county. That means 2.7 million ballots are sent out. They're going to just count as many ballots as they need, and we're not going to know where they came from, and they're going to get to enough to beat you. I'm just saying, that's what's going to happen. And I said, I'm not telling you to discourage you about Texas. I'm going to go fight every one of these cases. But you need to know that this is such a massive, expensive effort on somebody's part. I guarantee you this has happened in other places, other battleground states, whatever. I don't know where. I'm just trying to put you on notice that I think mail-in ballots are the thing that if you're going to lose, it's going to be mail-in ballots, nothing else. Well, I don't think he believed me. And we ended up winning all 12 of those lawsuits. And we had to be very creative because they were blocking me. They were trying to stall me at the courts of appeal in Austin and in Harris, where they're all Democrats. And I had to do these maneuvers we'd never done before, where we went around the courts of appeal, went directly to the Supreme Court, hoping that they understood that they were going to lose their seats, 4 of them, if we didn't get this resolved. Well, we did. And we won all 12 lawsuits, and Trump won Texas by 8 to 9%. Now, let's compare Georgia. Same vote margin 4 years ago as Texas. Trump loses by 14,000 votes. Why? Their attorney general said, fine, we'll agree to all this. You can have drop boxes. We'll let you mail them out to everybody. And shazam, they stopped counting votes for 3 days. And in every state that Trump was ahead with these battleground states, somehow 3 days later, he lost. That's why this whole fight, we have to win it on election integrity. Everything else that we care about, every other issue doesn't matter if we can't fix this. If the Texas House can't fix this law, and we can't count on those people to at least do that, which they didn't have time for, and we can't win the Court of Criminal Appeals, I'm telling you, we can't save Texas. And if we can't save Texas, we can't save the country. But it's right in front of us. In March, you go out and get these Court of Criminal Appeals elected, and every one of you, and I'm going to ask you to do something for Mr. Hopper, and that is I want every one of you to find 20 couples that will vote for him. Think about that. 20 couples who don't know who they're voting for. Most people don't know him. They don't know the guy that has a spot. They don't even know me. But they know you and they trust you. And if you say, look, I need your address, I need your phone number, and I need your email address, we're going to keep you informed. And you're going to stay on the phone with them until March, 5th? First Tuesday of March. You're going to stay in contact. It's not going to be him because he doesn't have time. He has time to call you, but he doesn't have time to call your friends. And besides, they don't know him. But they know you, and they will vote for him. And the reason I know this works is how I got elected the first time. So I know it works. We shocked them because we had all these people voting, and they didn't know where they came from. That's what's going to happen if you do this job. They'll have all these votes from all these people. They're like, where did these people come from? We didn't poll them. They don't usually vote. You guys can win this election. This room can win the election and have a big impact on the Court of Criminal Appeals, but you can win his election. And that's why I'm here tonight, to encourage you that even though it looks dire, my last story, founders, they're fighting the largest empire in the world. They have 17,000 people are fighting with Washington. He's lost every battle. The British have 87,000 troops. He keeps losing, he keeps losing, he keeps losing. He wins Yorktown and wins the battle. It doesn't matter how many battles you lose along the way. It doesn't matter how many impeachments there are. It doesn't matter how many times we lose, as long as we win in the end. And you have the opportunity to win in the end. And all it takes, a little work, a little prayer, and guess what? Mr. Hopper's our next state representative, and that's why I'm here. Let's go get him elected. God bless and thank you.